Imagine a city so corrupted that even God decides to destroy it. A place where immorality knows no bounds, where evil dominates every street, every house, and every heart. This is not a fictional story. This was the reality of Sodom and Gomorrah, two cities that, according to the Bible, faced God's wrath and were reduced to ashes in an unprecedented destruction. But what really happened there? What made God make such a drastic decision? The story you are about to hear goes far beyond what you imagine. To understand the destruction of these cities, we need to go back thousands of years in history and understand the context in which they existed. Sodom and Gomorrah were part of a group of 5 cities located in the valley of Siddim near the Dead Sea, an area that, at the time, was one of the most prosperous and fertile regions around. This was a time when the cities were at their peak, economically, overflowing with wealth but also engulfed in total moral and spiritual decay. Back then, the valley of Siddim was a fertile land, a stark contrast to the arid desert we know today. The two cities were known for their wealth and the great power of their rulers, but behind this prosperity, a deep evil was taking over every aspect of society. The Bible, in Genesis, gives us a clear view of the moral corruption that plagued these cities. They were not just places of abundant wealth, they were also places where immorality ran rampant. According to the sacred texts, the people of Sodom and Gomorrah had completely turned away from the ways of God. They were cities where violence, injustice, corruption, and disrespect for others ruled. But the question that intrigues many is, what was the specific sin that led to the destruction of these cities? The Bible gives us clues about the sin that led to the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, but these clues are interpreted in different ways. In Genesis 18, God reveals to Abraham that the wickedness of Sodom and Gomorrah had become unbearable. But what exactly was happening there? The biblical text suggests that sexual perversity was one of the main characteristics of these cities, something that became even more evident when, in Genesis 19, 2 angels sent by God arrived in Sodom to warn Lot, Abraham's nephew, and his family about the impending destruction. At that moment, a group of men from the city tried to assault the angels who were in human form. This episode has been interpreted by many scholars as an extreme demonstration of the sexual perversity that reigned in Sodom and Gomorrah. However, some scholars argue that the sin of these cities went far beyond that. The prophet Ezekiel, for example, provides a deeper analysis and points out that the sin of Sodom was not only sexual misconduct, but also pride, arrogance, and a lack of compassion for the needy. He says that the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah lived in luxury and did not help the poor and needy. Ezekiel 16:49. This verse reveals that while the cities were prosperous, their inhabitants had become insensitive and indifferent to the suffering of others. The cities of Sodom and Gomorrah were not just examples of sexual corruption, they represented moral failure on a broader level. Injustice prevailed, and people became selfish, ignoring the needs of their fellow humans. The lack of compassion for the poor, the disrespect for others, and the deviation from basic principles of kindness and justice were crucial aspects that led God to make the decision to destroy these cities. The story of Sodom and Gomorrah is also a story of mercy and an attempt at salvation. Before God made the final decision to destroy the cities, Abraham, the chosen patriarch, was deeply shocked and concerned about the impending destruction. Abraham knew that despite the corruption in Sodom, there were good people there, and he did not want the righteous to be destroyed along with the wicked. In a gesture of compassion, Abraham tried to intercede for the cities, asking God to spare them if there were enough righteous people in them. The negotiation between Abraham and God, as described in Genesis 18, reveals Abraham's great heart and God's willingness to grant opportunities for repentance and salvation. Abraham began by asking God if he would spare the city if there were 50 righteous people there. God agreed. Then Abraham, in an act of intercession, reduced the number of righteous people necessary to spare the city, 45, 40, 30, 20, until he reached 10. God promised that if there were at least 10 righteous people in Sodom, he would spare the city. But as we know, the reality was even darker. There were not even 10 righteous people in the city. The fate of Sodom and Gomorrah was sealed. With the decision made, God sent two angels to warn Lot and his family about the impending destruction of the cities. The angels told Lot that he and his family must flee and not look back. This instruction was crucial because the command to not look back symbolized a permanent separation from their sinful past, something that, however, was not followed by Lot's wife. When the angels warned Lot and his family to flee, they were told that punishment was imminent. The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah happened with unimaginable violence and speed. Fire and sulfur rained down from the sky, consuming the cities in total devastation. Everything was reduced to ashes, including people, animals, and buildings. This destruction was so sudden and relentless that even today, archaeologists and scholars try, in vain, to find concrete evidence of the event. The biblical account describes the scene as a total destruction, where God's hand brought final judgment upon a lost humanity. The city of Sodom and its sister cities were consumed by heavenly fire, bringing an unprecedented punishment. The scene of fire and sulfur falling from the sky is portrayed as the peak of divine wrath, a clear sign that evil had reached an irreversible point. One of the most symbolic moments in this story is the fate of Lot's wife. When the angels ordered Lot's family to flee and not look back, Lot's wife, with her heart still tied to the lifestyle she had in Sodom, disobeyed the divine instruction and looked back. The result was immediate and dramatic. She turned into a pillar of salt. This episode carries a deep symbolic interpretation. The transformation of Lot's wife into salt was not only a punishment, but also a reflection of her attachment to the sinful city and her past life. This act of disobedience serves as a warning for all of us. We must not allow our attachment to sin or our past to make us look back when we are already being called to a new path, a path of salvation and redemption. The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah was not just an act of judgment, but also a warning. The story of these cities, marked by corruption and decay, continues to be remembered as a symbol of how societies can become so corrupt that they lose all moral sensitivity. They are remembered as a warning against the dangers of pride, arrogance, exploitation of the poor, and lack of justice. The Bible teaches us that no matter how far people stray from divine principles, there is always an invitation for repentance, always a chance for change before the final judgment. Now, the question remains, what can we learn from this story? What does it teach us about the days we live in today? The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah reminds us that our actions have consequences, that morality and justice must be preserved in all areas of life, and that we must never ignore the opportunities for redemption. The story of these ancient cities remains relevant today, serving as a reminder that no matter how lost humanity may seem, there is always the possibility of choice, change, and repentance. And this lesson is valid for all of us. We can always choose to do good, act with justice, and live with compassion. As people in the city, the fate of Sodom and Gomorrah was sealed,